Hey, can you guys see me? Can you hear me?
Oh, it says you're Brad.
Yeah, that's not Brad at all.
Wonderful.
I am not Brad. I am discount Brad today.
You're
yeah, we're using this
lies.
Yeah, I've lied to you. So, so here we are.
It's okay.
And today we're going to be talking about mastering BattleCon. Is Charles going to be joining us today?
I believe so. He's got the link.
He should be.
All right. Charles is our 3-time world champion. Daniel is lead balance and Marco's community manager. I'm sure you guys all know these two faces very well. So,
if you don't know me at this point, I think something's wrong. I'm doing something very wrong.
I think you're doing a good job.
Charles can't hear us. Oh no. I don't know. Can you hear us on? Oh, okay. Sorry, Chris. This is just for the VOD and stuff. But can each of us say something so the chat can confirm whether or not our audio levels are balanced?
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Can you hear me? All right, chat. Can you just confirm whether or not that was acceptable? Hey, Brad. When did you get that expensive plastic surgery?
I think extensive, but probably both.
It's pretty extensive. This BattleCon money did go somewhere. So I'm just kidding.
He actually just got a really detailed mask of Chris's face, and he's just holding it in front of the stream.
This is Brad's Halloween costume, the Chris Solis Halloween costume.
That's a horrifying thought.
Okay.
Anyways, let's talk about BattleCon and being good. So which one of you is doing BattleCon the longest? Which one of you discovered BattleCon first?
When did
I think Marco.
Playing? Yeah, it was probably me.
I started playing 3 months after Dev, give or take.
Wow. Ooh, okay, definitely me because I played OG War around a month after it came out or something. And I messaged Brad because I was like, "Oh man, I missed the Kickstarter. Can I still buy it?" And
yep, that's you then.
Yeah. So I definitely me. I've been playing BattleCon for. If that's the case, I've been playing BattleCon for around 5 to 6 years now. So.
My God.
Yeah.
And probably not Chris.
Yeah, probably not Chris.
Yeah.
I've been playing BattleCon for maybe 2 months.
Oh.
So the skill level.
You are our newbie. You are the blank slate upon which Anderl and I can, impress upon.
Oh yeah. I've been going on this journey of understanding at a different level. As you realize the complexities of the game.
We need a Chris vs. Laura tournament. All the people
that would be so hype. and here's the cool thing: we should have one of us coach the other one before the game or something.
Or Cameron.
Stakes. Or Cameron, yeah. Oh my gosh, that'll be fun. Just watch Cameron play Hikaru and do sweeping fire palm strike on beat 1 or whatever.
Hey, if it works.
So, my first question is, if you're new to BattleCon like me, what are the top 3 things I should know if I wanted to understand the game at a stronger level?
All right. Do you want to answer this first, Daniel, or do I answer it?
Sure. So probably the most important thing in the game, just full stop, is range. Because a lot of the time you'll have new players who are looking at it and they'll be like, all right, I need to do something, and it can't hit. Yeah. So typically, and everyone's done this, I've done this plenty of times, I did it twice today, is just you look at your cards and you say, oh, do I have range? Do I not have range? What can my character do? And if you're a new player, it doesn't really matter if you can figure it out exactly. Most of the time, you'll just learn by doing stuff randomly. So you got your range, and then after that, it's probably just how the bases work. And even then, you can kind of figure stuff out by playing cards and seeing how it goes. So, I guess if you're asking for the most specific things, it's just play stuff. See what your ranges are. See if you were outsped and got stunned. Be like, oh, what happened? Or how can I do something that... How do I do what I didn't do last time? Why did my card lose? And a lot of the time, that's not really a thing that you'll get by reading your cards necessarily until you've played a lot. But once you've gone through 5 or 6 beats of just kind of button mashing, you can get a pretty good sense of, oh, this was a thing that happened. How does that not happen? I'll figure it out next time. Yeah, that's just kind of how it goes.
Yeah, I think what you said is absolutely correct, especially that part wherein like just reading the cards, it's not going to be good enough unless you have like 700, 500 games of experience where you can understand like, oh, based on these texts on the card, I would know the specific situations they're useful in and all that stuff. I mean, like I can't say that I've actually like played 20, 30 games with every character in BattleCon, but I know so much of the basics that like, playing a few games and just reading the cards is more than good enough to give me like a average to above average play level with said character. The thing about it is that if there are 3 things that I think are very important in BattleCon, that means I've already written guides about them. So let me recommend some guides for all of you. This way it's actionable. Number 1, understand the basis. Like Daniel said, very important because they're the basis for the entirety of the freaking game, right? Every single attack is starting with a base. And you just modify it with a style. So I highly recommend you understand the relationship between the bases, or the base pentagon, as we call it. I will link to the article on the base pentagon in the chat, and I hope that's useful to you. If you're watching the VOD, it's in the description. Number 2, I think it's very important to realize that you have... Oh, sorry. Were you going to say something, Chris?
Yeah, go ahead and finish that. I'll go back to base pentagon after.
Sure. Okay. I think the second thing that you have to realize is magic numbers are important. I also made a video guide about this. And if it's deeper level understanding, magic numbers, I think, are the natural progression from understanding the bases. Because the bases actually operate on magic numbers. And magic numbers are actually based on the bases. Essentially, magic numbers are a really good heuristic for, like, oh man, the timer's running out. The beat is taken too long. I don't know what stats I should have. And the magic numbers just say, hey, if you generally have these stats, you're generally going to win this beat. And then number 3, you have very important, but also probably the hardest thing is what Daniel just said, range. Because that's actually a function of positioning and hit confirm. 2 very important concepts that we've actually have guides about and very important. But the thing about this is that this is probably the most complex thing in the entire game. But it's something that you have to deeply, deeply understand. Like, it's the difference between being at range 2 from an opponent and then driving and then choosing whether or not to drive 1 or drive 2. Sure, you'll hit in both conditions, right? But where you ultimately end up on the board is what's more important than whether or not you hit. So in either case, if you're at range 2 and you drive, like, it's not just trivial to go, okay, I'm hitting anyway, so I'll just advance 1. It's not like that. You have to consider what happens if you advance 1 and what happens if you advance 2. Even if you'll hit in both cases, you'll end up in different positions. And one of them is the correct answer. There's no such thing wherein both are like, okay. I think the only situation wherein that happens is if the opponent's in the center and you're at range 2. Then maybe it doesn't matter. But most of the time, it does matter.
There might be weird style stuff going on sometimes.
Yeah, of course, yeah. Like, if it's against a reserved, you're going to lose the beat either way, right?
A quick tangent, Charles. Feel free to jump in at any time if you manage.
Yeah, sure. Welcome. Hi.
There you go.
Oh, you're here. I just don't see a video.
All right. So the disembodied voice is Charles Engstrom. Everybody say hi.
Hi, guys.
Hey, Charles.
Hello. Okay. What were you gonna ask, Daniel? Oh, sorry, Chris.
Oh, me. Sorry. Yeah, I was gonna ask you to tell us more about the pentagram, and just real quick, the relationships of what styles beat other styles. Is that what we're talking about? Like a Yomi circle?
Bases
beat other bases. Here's the link to the article that I was talking about. But essentially, you have to understand that there are 5 bases that are, common between every single character in the game, and they have their unique base. There are 6 bases that are common to everybody in the game, and then there's their unique base. Basically, you have to understand that it's like rock, paper, scissors, lizard, spot. At range 1 on the board, each of those bases beats 2 other bases and is beaten by 2 other bases. Essentially, what happens is... Oh, man. Do I even remember this off the top of my head? Drive beats shot, and burst. Shot beats burst and grasp. Strike beats drive and shot. Burst beats grasp and strike. Grasp beats drive and strike. Did I miss anything? Oh, and dodge beats everything.
And loses to everything, right?
Yeah, and loses to everything.
Dodge just kind of washes the whole thing away.
Yeah.
Well, here's the thing. Like, in the original base Pentagon, it says, oh, it's win and loses against everything because you don't deal damage. But we all three of us know, Charles and Daniel, that that's not the case. Dashing wins you the beat by default. Unless something horribly wrong happens, you win the beat when you dash.
Or dodge clashes strike, and then everyone gets very confused, and you try and figure out what to do next.
Oh my gosh.
Well, I definitely want to talk about dodge. From my experience in BattleCon Online, when I feel like that was when I first got to trying to read them so I can avoid that. But let's finish with these basics here. We went to the circle. There's a link. You should definitely check it out. And that's like step one. I can understand this. Now, you said that changes between each range. So if I'm further, that relationship changes?
It only works at range 1. If you're further, the entire circle breaks down.
Okay, got it.
Yeah. So, for example, if you're at range 2, burst can retreat 2, drive can't hit it, and turns out that things get really interesting because your styles start mattering a lot when you're at range 2.
Yeah. So that's the thing. Like, when you're at not range 1, your options become even more and more and more limited. So in BattleCon, the further and further you get, the less and less things you can do until you reach a point wherein only shot is the thing that matters. So usually...
Yeah, and a lot of the time, the game is about engineering situations where that's kind of what you need to do. Like if you're playing Ryuk, for example, as an obvious pick, if you're at range 5 or 6 from the opponent, you're probably doing all right. Yeah. And if you're at range 1 from the opponent, your base Pentagon might be fine, and you have 4 special action and point blank to crutch on, but the rest of your cards are often a problem there.
Yeah. I think the very important thing to realize when it comes to fixing or playing high-level BattleCon is this. What most people think is a game about reads, and, I literally just described the entire game as being based on rock, paper, scissors, lizard, Spock, right? But what you have to realize is that positioning actually changes the entire dynamic. And the entire point of the game, which is why I said positioning is like the most important concept, the entire point of the game, which is basically, Daniel's playstyle, Charles's playstyle, is that you have to engineer turns wherein even if you play your attack face up, your opponent can't do anything about it. Like, that's the entire point of BattleCon. You do everything in your power to get to a point wherein there's a beat where you have 100% guaranteed win no matter what the opponent does. And that's just how it works. Yeah.
So, Charles, we're talking about like top 3 things you need to, be good at BattleCon. And you heard us what we said. Did you want to add anything to that?
The thing is, like Daniel said earlier, hit confirm is like Daniel H.
Okay.
said earlier. It's like hit confirm is the most important thing to learn from basics, right? So once you got that down, you can start remembering cards and figuring out at what range your opponent can't hit. For example, I've been playing a lot of Berman now currently since he's new on...
Makes sense.
Yeah. And what a lot of people don't understand is they're using their shots because I'm at range 4 and then I just burst back and suddenly I have all the options and they have none because that is how BattleCon works. Giving all that space between us, it makes it a lot harder to play some characters.
But at the same time, if you do something like Dragon Breath Burst, right, to try and still hit them when you bounce back, and if you have War Mages down, Bourbon's one of those characters where you have 2 really good ranged options and 3 really good terrible ranged options.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, at least he has those ranged options, right?
War Mages is a good card.
It's a great card. Like people are like, oh, it deals no damage and has range 2 to 4. I'm like, yeah, but it literally sets up instant long range. What are you talking about?
War Mages is arguably one of the best styles in the game.
Yeah, it is.
Yes. It also works with all of his styles, with all of his bases because of the push. So you can do the burst, you can do the strike, grasp, go nuts,
Everything works. Like, that's what makes War Mages so good. Everything just works.
War Mage's drive can be a little spotty.
I mean,
Yeah.
it still works. That's the thing, right? It's still a range 1 to 3, power 4 thing. Like it's so good. Oh my god.
Let's make it a little more general for a second before we get to like specifics.
Sure.
Yeah, it's okay. Yeah,
Sorry,
so I want to roll into it. 'Cause I have a couple like tell me what to do in this situation questions, but we'll get there.
Sure.
At what point do I really need to start considering your opponent's cards? Like, let's say I just got BattleCON Online. I'm playing. I'm 10 games in. I'm getting bodied. How much of my losses is attributed to not knowing my opponent's kit?
Okay.
Do you think?
Charles.
I can go first. Sure. So what I think is the first thing you have to do is learn your own kit, and that basically takes like 10 matches or something before you know what your character is doing.
Yeah, at least a couple for sure.
Yeah. And then after that, you can actually just start by trying to read out and clash dodges. Basically, that it's as simple as that. If you do that, you can read when your opponent, my opponent has no good options at this range. He's going to dodge. When you start doing that, and you get that, like, okay, so what's my opponent's priority spread? It's usually like around 3, basically, right? Because
dodge is 3.
So dodge is 3.
Yeah.
So your options will probably be like, he's going a slow dodge, so like -1 priority, or a fast dodge with +1 priority. Of course, it's based upon your opponent's priority, right?
Yes.
And how confident you feel about your read. But starting to read out your opponent, you will have to first know about your own character and what your options are, right?
Yeah.
That was going to be my follow-up question. Like, I got to a point I'm playing people, and I'm getting dodged all the time. And how do I beat that? So you think the best way to beat that is I was just waiting, and like I was like, I wish I could buff myself when I know they're going to dodge, so then I can hit him later. But you're saying the best thing I should do is clash.
I might parry it.
Sort of. Yeah, so I sort of want to extrapolate a little bit on what Charles said. So the biggest thing, and I sort of talked about this earlier, is if something horrible happens to you in a game, that means that the opponent has something that's a huge threat. So, for example, you're playing as Hikaru, or however the heck you pronounce it, and thanks, Mark. And you get, War Mage is pushed across the board. That means that the threat in that situation was the War Mage's start of beat range 1 push. Or if you're playing against Cadenza and you get Clockwork shotted, right? That means that the threat is Clockwork plus shot, but mostly Clockwork. Yeah. So that's something that even while you're learning your kit, you can generally pick out, hey, this is the card that murdered me. Against Hikaru, Geomantic just kind of dealt 7 damage, and something went horribly wrong. Yeah. So and the answers to those might not be obvious, right? You might not realize immediately that, I'm on space 3 next to a Berman at space 2. He has War Mages up. I should maybe do advancing to advance across so he can't push me because now I'm in the corner.
Yeah.
Or, I'm playing 7. I have friendly up, so the opponent can't retreat. The opponent has dodge. Again, I advance into the corner and they can't run away from me. Yeah. The easiest answer to dodge is always be in the corner. Anyone can do it. Yeah, corner yourself. Anyone can do it. You can threaten it because you have range 1 to 4 on shot, or range 1 to 3 on drive, or drive plus range. And just basics of positioning and being in a space where the opponent doesn't want you to be can solve a lot of those problems.
Yep.
Clashing dodge is often good, but it's never guaranteed. If you're Berman, for example, and you're doing a charge 2 dodge, and they clash you at prio 1, you're probably not going to have a great time.
You're sad. Because
you're at -1, -2, and your clash chain is terrible. You might be able to swing might or strike or something and hope it works. Might usually works. Might's fine. Yeah, so that's a lot of what it is. You're trying to engineer a position where, you see what killed you in a game.
Yeah.
And because it's usually a thing that you can kind of figure out. And then from there, it's a lot of how does my kit let me deal with that? Because there often is an answer. It just may not be obvious.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of new players in the game right now. So if I were to be like, okay, Clockwork is destroying me, I'm writing that on my sticky, and I just commit that one card in memory, and I just try to play around that one card. that might get me out of like, I know we don't have ranks, but that's gonna get me out of bronze, right? Like that's gonna be how I'm gonna beat these newer players the first time at the same level as me when I try to identify their ace card. I mean, our character's designed that way to have an ace style.
Not everyone.
Not everyone. Cadenza definitely is.
Yeah.
And as Cadenza players will get better, you'll see more use of press and more use of mechanical and more use of battery because they're all amazing. And they're like secondary threats that help him set up for clockwork. Like if you dodge him and he played mechanical, you might just die straight up.
Lose. Yeah, I think you lose at that point.
So,
about hydraulic press too, it's like
hydraulic press is fun. But basically, a lot of the game really is identifying what the threat the opponent's playing around and identifying how you can follow up whatever their counterplay is. Even if you don't win the beat, you don't even have to hit. But if you both miss and you end up in a position where your threat is now even better, then you've still won.
Yeah.
That's why dodge is good.
Robert, yes, there will be ranked.
There will be ranks. Ranks don't exist now. That was me just describing quickly that I'm bad. Yeah. But
metaphorical bronze.
Yeah. Metaphorical bronze.
I think at the end, Chris asked this question, right? Which like Daniel and Charles started answering, and I guess I'll finish the answer to it. And the question is, how much of my games are lost because I don't know my opponent's kit? The hard truth answer of it is it depends on your character. But most of the time, 100% of your games are lost because you don't know your opponent's kit. That's usually how it goes. Because the thing about it is that characters aren't... Here's the thing. Characters are engineered in such a way that they work. You know what I mean? It's like, it's very, 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 very hard to play a character in such a way that they do nothing and don't do anything good enough to win, right? Most of the time, the simple answer of it is your opponent does things that are just better than the things you do. And by not playing around them, you've essentially just lost the entire game.
Some Flight 5s or 4s can make that happen.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? Some of them have to be that way because they are Flight 5 and Flight 4. But most of the characters in BattleCon Online and many of the characters in Devastation, until you reach like Flight 3 or Flight 4, and I assume if you're a newbie, you're not going to be trying a Flight 5 character immediately, right? So like most of the time you lose not because the attack you played is bad, but because the attack you played just loses to the attack the opponent played. Like if you do something along the lines of like a clockwork shot, but the opponent does a retreat 4 burst effect. Like clockwork shot's not a bad attack. You didn't play your character wrong. You just played around the wrong thing. And that's the ultimate answer to that question. Almost 100% of your games are lost because you didn't play around a specific thing or read the opponent wrong. So in the end, if you want to fix that, do what Charles and Daniel said, because really understanding your opponent's threat is the biggest deal.
So I'm going to combo that with the question we have. I'm going to show it to the audience.
Sure.
Can you guys see that? How to stay motivated when you keep losing. So my first thing about this is, and this is true for basically any fighting game that's basically any of them, that the fighting games really are about a journey as opposed to the win. They don't give you that micro feel good of like, oh, I'm progressing at level 1. Like when you win in a fighting game, you beat a human being, right? BattleCon is no different. So sometimes you might lose a lot of games before you really truly win your first one. But no matter how many games you lost, we 1 or 20 when you do, and you realize on that journey you've understood, we're talking about the style circle, or I committed this card to memory, and when you use those tools, you're going to feel really good. And that's why people play fighting games. It's about the journey. There's no end. There's no, I got to evil grand stage or whatnot, That's how you just worry about losing. Don't worry about losing. It's okay. Get something from it.
I think at the end of the day, right, in BattleCon, especially in BattleCon, compared to like any other fighting game I've had, BattleCon has discrete turns, wherein it's very easy to identify whether or not one person has won or lost. And no matter what you say, no matter how bad you are, I'm almost 100% guaranteed that you've at least won a beat or 2 every game you've played. And I think that's what makes BattleCon a little bit easier to get into than your traditional fighting game. Because in a traditional fighting game, like if you win in neutral and you hit once and you're like, yes, but you don't really notice because the game's over in like 30 seconds. Like in your mind's eye, you hit the opponent once, but then so what? You got bodied immediately and then die. In BattleCon, you have discrete beats wherein you reveal an attack and you go, aha, I won. And that's good, right? Like, even if you don't win the entire game, you've won a beat or two, which simply means that if you had just done something that caliber more times than the opponent, you would have won the game. So I think there's a very natural sense of progression in BattleCon that you don't see in other fighting games, because in the situations wherein you're able to utilize your tools properly is rewarded almost immediately by you seeing your opponent's health bar drop by like a third or a fifth. And that's very good. Like, that's what makes BattleCon a little bit more lenient to the new player experience. I mean, after all, BattleCon is essentially that, right? It's like a gateway fighting game, like Dive Kick or something like that, right? Like, that's the point. It's meant to be a little bit more lenient in that sense.
It might be free of technical skill, but like the core aspects are still there.
Yeah, definitely. I'm not saying it's a baby's fighting game. I'm just saying like it introduces you to the world of fighting games in a easier manner compared to your average fighting game. Because if you try to get into like not even Dragon Ball Fighter Z is simple. Like, if you try to get into any of the Arc System games that aren't Dragon Ball Fighter Z, I think you're gonna like,
hey, cross tag's not too bad.
Okay, fine. Like, okay, fine. If you get into like any of the Guilty Gears, I think you might have a hard time. Right?
You know, I just give you a little story about your style circle. I entered a cross tag tournament not knowing what the buttons are. And I just quickly Googled like what beats what. I'm talking like the first 2 paragraphs. Beat a dude. Got to round 2. Just saying, I don't know what my attacks do. That's just fundamentals. You know, could have done 0 damage, but beat some guy. So still true for BattleCon too, you know, working the fundamentals.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, chat's a bit weird. It's like nobody's talking. That's weird. Chat's usually noisier than this. Ask us questions. Maybe it's because Brad's not here. This is the problem when we don't have Brad.
We have fake Brad.
Yeah, we have fake Brad though.
But yeah, the other thing is that there are some characters that just really are easier for new players, still will get you a lot of just figuring out what the game's experience is. Notably, Alexian, really, really good at enforcing mix-up, even against great players. You have to respect he's got like the one fast card, the one thing that messes with range, and a lot of running at you.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, new players have a lot of trouble figuring out what their optimal range is and what their general game plan is. Alexian's really good with that. Eligor tends to be really good for new players. Mostly heavies. I mean, Caesar is not terrible, though his UA is complicated. Other than that, his cards are very straightforward.
Cadenza.
Cadenza's easy. You get a lot of bad habits out of Cadenza, though.
I mean, people always say that. Like, you get a lot of bad habits from playing Cadenza. I mean, I understand that, but like, that's like saying, oh man, you get a lot of bad habits from playing Gaspar. I mean, like, I get it, but like, if you want to just hop into the game and like feel like you're semi-competent, Cadenza's not bad.
Yeah. I'm trying to think. I had a couple of new players who decided that they really wanted to try the game, and so they were like, oh, who are the most complicated characters in the game? And so they're looking through, they play like 2 games with beginner characters, and one of them is like, all right, so this guy looks cool. And they played, I believe it was Gaspar versus Benvir.
Oh my gosh.
And like 45 minutes later, they're just like, well, that was a game. That sure was a game.
Did they stop playing BattleCon after that? I mean, like...
No, but they were very confused. They definitely stopped for the day.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, Gaspar is not the simplest character to play, and Benvir just makes things ridiculous anyway, so...
Also, yes, the person in chat who recommended Magdalena. Magdalena's also a fairly good beginner character. Her whole game plan is run away, and then at the end of the game, be next to people.
Yeah, you win. People, actually, a lot of people who are, above average players say, like, I don't know why you guys keep recommending Magdalena as a beginner character. Like, she's so hard to play. And I'm like, no, she's not. Like, I think the thing is that, like, people make this... I think this is the big thing, right? That is number 4 on my list of top things to know if you're playing BattleCon. And it's that, like, I know it's called BattleCon. I mean, like, I know it's a fighting game, but like oftentimes the best move in certain situations is to not attack people. like like as Maggie, you don't go in and go like, yes, my best attack is spiritual drive, so I'm gonna do that all the time. Like, no, just stop. It's a strategy tactical game, strategy tactical. It doesn't always have to be about fighting, which is why dodge is so good.
Just play Priestess Dash every beat.
Yeah,
Priestess Dash every beat.
To build on that, what do you think the first player matchup for teaching somebody the game is?
Ooh.
So the official, Devastation matchup is Schecter versus Eligor. And that one is particularly good, not because it's perfectly balanced. I think it's pretty well balanced. But because Schecter and Eligor both have tokens, both have a lot of tokens. They both don't really ever feel bad anteing their tokens.
Mm-hmm.
And their cards all do very obvious, reasonable things. So you're Eligor, right? You have a billion stun guard. Okay, cool. Can Schecter ever break your stun guard? No. Except on Brand. What's the counter to Brand? Okay, you can soak it, to mitigate the damage and prevent her from healing as much. You can get anti-stun immunity. Like, you both have reasonable things that you can do, and then sometimes the Eligor player, lands a counter, flips the board, and is like, yes, I'm a genius.
Oh no, I'm a genius. I think what makes that matchup really fun is that both of those players' unique characters as unique abilities. How do I explain this? Like, when Schecter's winning, Eligor's ability activates. You know what I mean? It's like, when one side of that matchup wins, they're actually fueling the fire of the other side of the matchup. Which means that it never feels bad to be in that matchup. Because, whenever you lose a beat as Eligor, you're like, at least I still got tokens. And then whenever you win a beat as Eligor, Schecter's like, at least I'm faster, I can still get tokens next beat. It never feels bad to be either side of that matchup. Because you always feel like what Daniel said, you always feel like you have stuff to do, right? It never feels like you're hopeless.
Xavier mentioned in the chat that he has a hard time playing Shek in that matchup, which is common. I think that matchup, especially for new players, is definitely easier for Eligor.
Yeah.
But I think the interesting thing is as the Schecter player starts to get better quickly in the game, because that's one of those matchups where a lot of these character gimmicks just don't work. It's like, I can go at speed 7 all the time, which is totally pointless because Eligor is never going to go above 5. But a lot of that is looking at, my going fast also fuels these two abilities, right? Combination and Brand, that are super good against Eligor specifically.
Yeah.
Yes.
And go for it.
No, okay, yeah. Also, you realize that anting tokens is not what you want to do all the time. For example, in that matchup, advancing burst becomes really good. Spiral burst, for example.
I mean, it does advance.
It goes to priority 0, which is super awkward, but super good.
Yeah. I think Xavier points it out, right? My match as Shek was a lot better after I was told to try and bluff out Eligor's tokens and leave him vulnerable. I think that's what makes it such a good beginner matchup. Like that's the thing, right? It's okay that one of the players ends up having a hard time winning the matchup, because the point of the matchup is to teach you what the game's all about. And if you ended up learning, hey, maybe I shouldn't just waste all of my tokens. You learn 2 things. Number 1, you don't have to spend all the tokens all the time because you realize that some characters are just slower than others. Number 2, you realize that to beat Eligor, you have to bait out tokens. So it seems like the matchup fulfilled its goal in teaching you 2 core things about BattleCon that are really, really important for beating almost any other character. So I'd say that was a success,
Yes.
Yep.
It also gets It also gets all the small things like soak and stun guard and ignore stun guard. All those basic things are there in that matchup.
And trying to figure out if reverse pushes as far as possible.
Yeah, can we? Let's not talk about rules here. We're not mastery, not rules lawyering. Well, here's the thing, right? It depends on the set you're in. That's the ultimate answer to that question, right? If you're in this set, which is Dev Remastered, we have the Schecter Eligor fight, but each set actually has its own, predetermined, this is the thing that you have to play kind of matchup.
I think Fates is Thesla versus Benvir.
Yeah,
that was a
Fates
weird one.
is the worst though. Like, do not like Fate's starter matchup might be the weirdest one. Like, but I think Devastations is the best. I think Devastations is actually the best.
Yeah.
Followed by War, followed by Trials, maybe, and then followed.
Is War Luke versus Vana?
No. War is Cadenza versus Hikaru, I think.
No,
Okay.
it's Hikaru versus.
No. The box art isn't the starter fight, right? Like,
No. I'm well aware, but it's not Cadenza because Cadenza makes you do that stuff. I'm quite sure.
For some reason, I thought it was Luke versus Vana. At least, someone says Hikaru versus Kadath.
Hikaru versus Kadath sounds like that is the box.
That's the tutorial matchup, at least.
Yeah, that's the tutorial matchup.
All right, there you go.
Yeah, okay.
And-
if that's the case, then yeah, that's still a good matchup. Like, because the thing is, like, you realize on one end that Kadath has a lot of ranged options that make Hikaru sad, but at the same time, you realize Hikaru has a lot of options that make Kadath equally sad. It's like
Advancing is a pretty good card.
I just advancing drive through your trap, and Kadath's like, oh no, and then he just cries.
I got a question, and this is mainly for Daniel. How challenging has it been to try to rebalance characters that weren't made with FG in mind now that FG exists? I don't know.
Good
what
luck,
FG is.
Daniel. Force gauge.
Force gauge.
Where's
All right,
the-
so one thing
Actually,
that I wasn't.
Force gauge didn't exist in the first game. I think a lot of people might not know that because we have new people coming to this. So
All right,
But
that is
first-
actually what I'm about to go into.
okay,
So Force Gauge was added in Fate, sort of. It was really worked in as part of War Remastered, and then got refined a bit in Trials. And from what I can tell, because I wasn't super involved in War Remastered playtesting, a lot of people assume that all of the Fate characters were heavily playtested with Force Gauge, which does not seem to be the case from my experience.
Not a lot, actually, just a few. Like, you definitely feel it, right? Like Seraphina definitely feels somewhat that way. Like it's like, you know, why does Silver exist even, right? Or Eustace, for example, very like it's like, why does Barons only have Stun Guard 1? Like why just one? Like,
yeah, but at the same time, you run into things like Zanisha, for example, where her kit has weird interactions with Force Gauge because it cares a lot about very specific numbers.
yeah, which makes it weird. Yeah.
Sort of to go on a really quick tangent, the reason that I like Force Gauge so much from a gameplay standpoint is that the ability to anti-stun guard reduces stun pressure by a little bit. As in, if you have a shot and you don't have any stun guard options, on your styles, you're not just guaranteed to be stunned. That bumping from 2 to 3 or 2 to 4, depending on, but pretty much 2 to 3, it actually, I think, helps the game a lot and also makes it better for new players because you're not as likely to get stun locked.
Mm-hmm.
Also, it stabilizes a couple matchups where characters who just didn't have slow options, see Byron versus Schecter, I think was like one of the famous, this is a terrible matchup because Schecter always outspeeds Byron. And with Force Gauge, that part of it is this weird, unique interaction, but a lot of that is that things have stabilized on that point. Going slow is now a little better than it was before.
Yeah.
So part of the rebalancing of characters for Force Gauge is that it really doesn't change that much. The effects that we want out of Force Gauge are mostly related to that reduced amount of stunning going around. And I'm totally fine with that. When you have an issue like, damage caps, they don't play well with Force Gauge. Devastating shot is legitimately a problem, and that needs to be fixed. But things that are sort of in that shape, right? You have this is the damage cap. I know that 2+2, 4 damage. Okay, this is going to be an issue. Sometimes, like Deathless Smoke, for example, on Byron, that's fine. I mean, it's an interesting thing. It's expensive, and it's Byron.
Yeah.
But the rest of it, bonuses going around, like Playful, Eating, Force Prio, okay, we have to look at that. Long story short, it's not that hard because there's about 3 or 4 different types of effects that it messes with a lot. And once we know what those types are, damage caps, bonus manipulation, and soak that has specific boundaries, right? Like if you need to soak 4 and now the opponent can do 5 damage because of that +1, this affects Byron a lot. Those are where it affects. The rest of the game, it doesn't really change that much.
Yeah.
From a balance standpoint.
Yeah, makes sense. I have nothing to add. Like, this is your wheelhouse. Balance, that's you.
A couple of other balance questions since we're in the same. What's your favorite characters to rebalance in Devastation Remastered?
For anyone who's been following me talking about this, it's Caitlyn. I really like Rangers. I was for a while convinced that she was, definitely wasn't balanceable originally. And I sat down with Brad and we talked about, what kind of UA to use. And we basically just went back to what she had originally. There's an article that I put together a couple days ago.
Linking in the chat right now.
Yep, go for it. And I like complex characters. I mean, the characters that I've always brought to tournaments are not complex. It was Schecter, Benvir, Rexan, typically, because I like mix-ups. And also, Rexan is the easiest autopilot character in the entire game. Thanks, Marco.
Thank you. No, he's not Eric, okay?
I mean, but I love new Eric, so people are going to hate me so much soon.
But fine. New Eric is fine. More control-y, less damage.
Yeah. But also, I like characters that need to set up for things in advance a lot. So partly characters that have a lot of positioning control. So, for example, we balanced the Tavia, which is basically just regular Tavia, but with lower numbers and slightly more nuanced UA. Or styles. UA is the same. So things like that I really like. Yeah, in general.
Yeah. Can I answer this question? Because I actually did something.
Go ahead. Yeah.
This time. Joel. Joel is my answer. So the thing about it is that when it comes to me on a personal level, I'm a playtester. I'm not like lead of balancing, right? So really, when you're a playtester, you really playtest for a few things. You don't usually end up playtesting for like, oh, how well is this character gonna do in the final meta when we're all in tournament level and all that stuff. You usually go for game feel, right? And that's a big deal with the character. So when we balanced Joel, it was Rob Bending. Thanks for backing. Sorry. When we balanced Joel, it wasn't because Joel was over or underpowered, right? Like he wasn't trash and he wasn't like top 5 OP. But the thing about it is that we balanced him because like he just wasn't feeling right, especially with the changes to dash and dodge and everything.
Yeah. Joel's weird because a lot of Joel's kit was just based on like the opponent doesn't get to play as a kit in general.
I mean, I guess that's a big idea about all of the characters I ended up playtesting in Devastation. The opponent just doesn't get to play.
That is the Marco special.
The Marco special.
If you ever look at Marco's custom characters, it's the same thing.
They are. It's so true. Like Zach is literally just, hey, the opponent shouldn't play. I love Kadath. I love Rokyok. Like all of these characters are just like, yeah, if you do well, the opponent doesn't end up playing. But in reality, like I like the new Joel a lot because we rebalanced him to fit more with his, what do you call that? To fit more with his like fantasy, right? Because before it was like he's supposed to be this hunter with like, oh, I have all of these cool weapons like Dante from Devil May Cry, and then in the end he's like, I just do shot and then dash and then like maybe Iron Star and then I dodge and then I dash and then I like Iron Star and then shot and like it didn't fulfill that fantasy. So yeah, there you go.
All right.
So one question that I just saw that I want to show to people, which did that pop up? Is someone? Okay, I tried to join it. It's the rebalancing dash to dodge versus moving to force gauge by Xavier. Dash to dodge is a much larger change than force gauge.
Indeed.
In general, it's a good change for game health because everything moving to smaller priority. For example, if you ever want to have a really fun time, try clashing dash as Benvir when your style spread is +2, +1, +1, +1, -1. It doesn't work very well. Yeah. Generally, the ability to clash dodge is better for the game, and the fact that it's now harder to chain dodge or dash with other movements means that it's a lot less safe and setups tend to work better. But what that means is that anyone who cares about prio math, Schecter, Demetros, Hekesh to some degree, is sad. And
happy.
I can... Well, no, going from dash to dodge means that...
No,
really
they're sad and happy, right?
Sort of.
I mean...
So basically, making that change, those characters were generally really good. I mean, I don't personally like Demetros that much. Lim's a special case, so we'll talk about in a moment. I don't personally like Demetros that much, but he's a cool character. And so making that change did affect a lot of character balance because those sort of were baked into the game, right? If you had a card that's like Murderum's Finisher or Blisshammer, right? You have an on-hit, the opponent has -10 prio next beat. You kind of know what the point of that is. That's a dash counter. I don't know, it's Murderum, so there's no more dash. And it's still a pretty good finisher. But fast characters are really good. Part of the whole thing in the game is that if you go faster, you always do sort of have an edge on the opponent.
Yep.
Most fast characters tend to be able to mess with soak to some degree. Not always, but most of them.
ISG.
I think everyone catch. Some of them have ISG as a mix-up, and sure they do lower damage, but there's a piece of the game that they really do have control over. So for a lot of them, like for Schecter, removing her ability to jugular grasp and counter dash freely, she was still good. I mean, I've played a ton of Schecter games. She just gets one of her freest options, no longer matters. Lim, for example, she has a very specific dash counter. She has Fathomless Burst. She has Fathomless Shot. She has stuff that says, all right, if my prio has a huge difference, then I get to do a ton of damage and move anywhere and life is good. That meant that when we rebalanced Lim, she needed a very specific change in order to deal with the fact that she no longer had this tool because she's not a fast character, she's a mix-up character.
Yeah.
And those were the characters that tended to have more of a problem with the change.
Indeed.
And so those needed kind of more specific work. I mean, Demetros, the fact that he can no longer jousting Deathblow and do, if their burst is down, a guaranteed 8-ish damage with high crescendo, sure. And maybe that's good for the game because there's no oops, I lose situation. But it is a really major change. So yes, dash to dodge, much harder to change than force gauge, which was much more predictable. We kind of knew what force gauge was going to break.
Yeah. Okay. Do we want to move on to other questions, Chris?
Yeah, let's go to... I'm going to try to go back to the getting good questions, and we'll go back to balanced questions shortly. So give me a second to take a peek here. Okay, this is kind of a Charles question.
Oh, a Charles question.
I just feel like you would have a strong answer to this. How are you able to set up for a particular scenario that you need when you can't control your opponent?
It all depends on what you're talking about. I mean, a particular scenario that you need when you can't control your opponent, it's like that is all about previous beats, I would say. So when you get into a scenario where you can't do anything, it means you have misplayed not this beat, but the beats before, which means that there are times when you do not use when you lose beats intentionally to get better beats next beat, and knowing when you get those beats is super rare. I tend to dodge into attacks, for example, to go down to finisher range and then just finish people out of nowhere because their dodge is down and they're just like, oh, I didn't see this coming, and I'm like, oh yeah, Red Moon Rage or Supernova or whatever.
Or the Charles Classic is Tsunamis Collide.
Oh yeah, Tsunamis Collide. I did that against Daniel actually once World. I just like
more than once, I think.
Huh? I'm sorry.
I think once a year.
They just throw like every time.
I mean, I could dodge
basically,
over him.
Yeah.
And he was just like, oh, I'm gonna stand here in the middle, Malice, and I was like, well, I'm not gonna dodge past you. Take your 2 stupid tokens, and then I moved Juto to the other side of the board and just Tsunamis Collide, and that's game.
Sounds game. I have an answer for this. that I was miming the entire time. Let me just, to quote Piccolo from Dragon Ball, dodge, Gohan! Dodge! That's a simple answer. That's why dodge is so good. But you have no control options. Just dodge.
But I mean, the flip side of that is that if you can set up for a good beat without dodge,
that's even better.
Then you have a good beat and also the ability to dodge.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. Like I feel like if you're from a beginner's perspective, you undervalue dodge so much because you just think, oh, this is a get out of jail free card. But it's way more than that. And if you want to get better at BattleCon, I know this sounds like a bad habit, but it's like just spam dodge. Like you'll win way more games. Like you'll win way more games than you lose. Trust me.
Also, and this is really useful, you will figure out pretty quickly where you want to move, right? Because where to end up when dodging is not an easy choice a lot of the time. You know, sometimes you want to dodge out, sometimes you want to dodge in. I've seen games where, you know, you're playing as, what was a notable one? I was playing Welsi against somebody's Eerie, and Comet was down, and so I did a move with range 1 to 5. So they go, okay, I don't want to take, 3 or 4 free damage. They dodge back to range 6 and take something like 13 free damage. Oh, no. Because that's just how it goes sometimes. Yeah. That's a notably painful decision, but even, if you're Rukyuk, do you want to dodge to range 2? Do you want to dodge to range 3, but you're in the corner now? Or do you want to try and take the center and try and do a burst, for whatever reason? There's a lot of weird decisions there.
Is it a thing to use dodge to just move and not do the cross up, don't hit me thing?
100%.
Have you played much Carolyn? Because when you're playing a mobile, tank, if you have Soak 2, for example, and you're at range 4 or more, you need to soak up and run at them and hope it works.
Just go for the mutating dodge and just be happy that you have Soak 4 and not going to take any damage anyway.
Yeah. I think that's the thing, right? Like, people are so obsessed with the dodge clause, the cross-up dodge clause, that they forget that, like, dodge is literally just move 3. And, like, that beats a lot of things, even without the dodge clause.
We can also talk.
Yeah. One of my favorite sort of thought experiments in the game, sorry for cutting off Charles, is...
No, it's fine.
You have your Rukyuk, right? You're in the corner, you're maybe low on ammo, and you're up against somebody. And you sniper reload, as one does. This is hardly rare.
Yes.
And they played burst, and they moved to the center.
You mean dodge? I don't think
they played... So
burst.
They bursted away from you. Say you were on space 7, they were on space 6.
Oh, yeah, you're in melee.
They bursted back to the middle of the board.
Yeah.
So now you're in this weird situation where you can reload to any space on the board, but you're going to get hit if you make range greater than 1. Does that make sense? And there's no really good answer to that puzzle, right? If you crossfire reloaded, then it might be a different story. Also, crossfire reload is good, and people should do it sometimes.
Yes, great.
I've been seeing it more, which is nice.
Yeah.
But there are really interesting situations of burst to the middle, cover the outside of the board, and is Rukyuk willing to take the damage to make the range? And there's no good answer to that.
But usually the answer is yes.
I mean, the same could be said about point blank shot, for example. So. If you're in the center, Rook is in the corner, and he plays point blank shot, and you just dash because you had no way to get to him, or you figured he would do like a gunner's grasp or something stupid.
Yeah.
You get to the question: should I retreat 3 or 2? 3 and take no damage, or should I advance 2 to get back to the center?
I mean, that one you probably.
Yeah,
you probably advance to the center.
the correct answer is probably take 3 damage and go back to the center, right? But I've seen a lot of people who just basically just run back to the corner and then they are out of their dodge and
against a full board Rook. No.
No.
Yeah, that's not great.
That's bad.
But a lot of the time the game really is about, if you have a decent option now, but you're burning too many future beats in the process, whether your range is now terrible and you're not playing Rexan and have Devastating up to try and fix it, or some other range fixing tool, whether you're playing something that has a lot of threat. So, for example, if you are Kaja and you just played your range 1 dodge card, you have to sort of figure out, look, my best defensive option is down. How do we deal with that? Or Schecter with combination down. So there's a lot of interesting things there in terms of how do you play the beat in order to do okay. Maybe you could do better this beat, but also be set up best for next beat and the beat after.
Yeah. Okay. I've posted the YouTube video as my answer. I literally made an entire video about this topic. All right.
Wow. So I'm going to ask one more question, and then we're going to rapid fire the balance questions because we're almost at the top of the hour. So we can all answer this. What do you look for in a main?
Oh.
I think that's a fun one. You want to start, Marco?
What do I look for in a main? So I'm a Johnny in Magic. If that jargon makes no sense to you, it means when I play, I like it when characters let me express something about myself. Which is why I love combo decks. Which is why I love making decks with weird interactions. It's because I like it when my personality shines through a character. So this means that in BattleCon, this usually means characters with high degrees of customizability or a lot, and I mean a lot, of play paths, right? So this means like it's the antithesis to a character like Cadenza, who basically plays the same 4 attacks every game, right? Like I like characters like Riflum, wherein you can have like 7 million different combinations of what you end up looking like because you buff your bases and stuff. I like characters in Devastation like Joel. I love him because you change your setup for almost every time. And then when you do dual wield, you can like bring out a new weapon and be like, haha, I made this cool combo of cards. Like, you know, I do dual wield drive to give my strike extra range and stuff like that. That's awesome. And I love characters like Enderbite because Enderbites literally just make your own fighter. So, yeah. Those kinds of characters tend to be the characters I really love. And they also tend to be characters with lots of options, right? Because that's their entire point. They have lots of options, which makes them more customizable to how I want to play.
I'm going to follow up because I'm the exact opposite type of player as you. I like to, I like to play like slow, heavy hitters that just kind of like try to disrespect you more than actually try to win the game. You know, and I try to use my play style to limit your options or get you to psych out. You know, like I like that Genie character we played on stream. That's like exactly the kind of character I would make.
Ooh, Daijin?
Daijin.
Yeah, so good. Like that's a Chris Solis character right there.
How do you pronounce his name, Charles?
Daijin.
Oh, it is Daijin. Okay.
Daijin.
Oh, that's
I
right.
pronounced
You
it right.
my name. There you go.
No, you say Daijin, right? It's Daijin.
Daijin?
It's fine. Daijin.
Daijin.
Okay, wait, Charles, for posterity's sake, does Daijin speak with like an Arabic accent or a Southern accent? So is he more genie or more cowboy is my question. It's the difference between like, your wish is granted and your wish is granted, master, and stuff like that. Which one is it? I just want to know.
I feel like these stereotypes you're putting on the characters do not exist in the worlds of Indians, correct?
That's fair. That's fair.
We just take it next level and just get Shaq to voice him and just call it a day.
Actually, just get Charles to voice him. Exactly.
Oh yeah.
There you go, Charles.
Let's go.
There you go.
It'll not be the. I mean, you still want to go for the deep booming voice though. So yeah, that's not mine.
There
Like
are
Genie
microphone
from
filters for that. Yeah.
So you want
sorry?
Robin Williams, like
Yeah.
Genie from Aladdin.
I mean that would be weird, but also he's dead, so it's a problem.
No, I'm saying like a voice similar to that. I'm not saying actually Rob. You know what, Daniel? What do you look for in a main?
So, I tend to play a lot of very setup-heavy characters. So, a lot of the time, and like I had said earlier, a lot of Schecter, Rexan, Benvir was my team for a long time. The thing about Benvir is that Benvir has amazing styles that all have garbage range and need to be in very specific positions.
Yes.
And he's awful in clashes because Spire's range is terrible. But what that means is that if you can be in the right spot, if you can, be in certain board configurations, he is incredibly oppressive.
You win.
And that is the kind of thing that I like in characters. Characters where you have to work for something, but if you can win the beat in specific ways, or even lose the beat in specific ways, you can just stomp people next beat.
Yeah.
And that's why, again, a lot of Caitlyn. I played a lot of Wardlaw in Trials for similar reasons, and also Lucida. You should ask Charles about playing against Wardlaw sometime.
Yeah, it's fine. I've actually gotten better about it, but yeah, it's
there's a lot of salt there for a while.
There is a lot of salt.
Line.
I like Veko a lot in Wanderers, and actually my most played for a while, recently especially, was Ray Call. Because again, a lot of board configuration, board control, trying to do combos that are hopefully balanced to be reasonably fun for the opponent, but kind of situational, for huge payoff. You know, sometimes you're like, oops, I hit for 7, I hit for 8 at full board range. That happens.
How about you, Charles?
I play characters that make me feel like clever for doing small stuff, like finding weird clash chains that I win later, way down the line and stuff like that. I loved the original Wellesley, which people found to be a nightmare. People don't remember it, but that's fine. And I agree the new one is better, but the old one was kind of cute.
Okay. I see. So you like shenanigans. It's your answer.
Oh, yeah. That's why I'm waiting for Eric. Shenanigans will happen.
Yeah. All right.
Going back to that Eric first question, it was like, oh, why do you keep playing when you keep losing? Like all these are tied to like our personalities, so we can kind of like shine through, and that's really how you should pick your main, and that's why you should be having fun playing game, whether you win or
Just
lose.
have fun playing the game, okay? Like win or lose, it shouldn't matter. Like that's the point. That game itself should be fun. That's the deal. All right, do we just rapid fire through the rest?
Yeah, we'll just go through some of them. Here's a good one. What are the current worst matchups?
Dev remastered or not?
Interpret it as you wish.
Zamasul versus Voko.
Yeah, Zamasul versus Voko is one of those matchups where a character's gimmick, for example, Zamasul's lots of mid-range, or Zamasul's range control and movement control versus Voko's needing to move and generally kind of being a terrible character, don't play nicely with each other.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a lot of the time why something gets, engine level reworked. Voko changes his UA, or something like Paradigm of Haste might be changed specifically to not mess with movement in the same way. Those are pretty bad. Carolyn versus Jenna is pretty bad for the same reason, because moving at end of beat, every beat, means that a Jenna can never give petrification because Carolyn is never next to you.
Yep.
Also, it happens to accidentally beat Gaze because you're faster. So those are both pretty bad. I don't know in BCO, honestly, what the worst matchup is. I don't think there's anything there that's particularly atrocious on the same level.
That just speaks to how well you've been balancing it then. Because it's like, I'm thinking about BCO, the worst matchup in my head is like a 7-3 or something, and that's not bad. Like, that's not Voko versus Zamasul being like 0-10.
Well, that combos into the next question. Now that BCO is out, what are some... and there are only some fighters on there. Are they getting different balance changes than the rest? How do these combine with the physical version? Let's talk about that way.
So for part of Dev Remastered and Unleashed and this whole big box, we're doing patch cards for the other sets. And Trials ended up, I think, pretty well balanced. There's some minor changes. We were testing like one Dravel card to give him a swap on one card that might play well. Darius might do with a 1 point of power knocked off of staggering. But for the most part, Trials basically isn't changing. War in particular, which is kind of silly because this is going to be the 4th version of War balance-wise if we change it, given that War Extended had balance patches, could definitely use some work. Yes, we're looking at Hayden. But War also, a lot of those balance patches weren't really structured, overarching balance work. They were kind of like, hey, this character is original look. Maybe we should fix that. Or this character is original Magdalena and
that's interesting.
Something's going on here and she's just kind of boring. The War Remaster definitely helped, and we plan to release bounce patches, but the BCO characters are the ones that have the most people playing them because it's really easy, the most games because of that, and also the ones that I can get the easiest testing in with. For otherwise, I would heavily encourage anybody who's interested in going to the Discord and joining playtest and chatting about things, because
the Discord.
We have a lot of people actively testing things, but we don't tend to do paper testing on BCO characters because those already get a lot of play.
Yeah.
So yes, I do think that the BCO characters will be the best balanced, partly because a lot of the characters that have really severe matchup problems aren't in BCO yet. We're going to have an interesting time when, for example, Hakech comes out, and then everyone can experience the fun of Hakech vs. Ryuk, which is not as bad as it seems, but pretty bad.
Which is annoying because you have to do point-blank strikes while he's at range 6.
This is also one of the reasons for the trick change in the last patch. Things like that matchup. But yes, BCO characters I do expect to be generally better balanced. Hopefully the differential is not huge, but just more play tends to do that.
I see.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. More questions, but we're going to answer them a little more quickly just so we can get some information out there.
Yeah.
What are the plans for tournament legality regarding promos moving forward? Are promos legal? What about tuck boxes for fighters and Jin and other characters?
I can answer this, right?
Yeah,
Sure.
go on it.
Yeah.
Go, Marco.
Every promo we're releasing in Unleashed is legal. If it's not in Unleashed and it's a promo, it's probably not legal. And let's combo this with the other question about Juto and Borneo. Juto and Borneo have always been legal. They're not like suddenly becoming legal. They've always been legal. And that's the thing, right? Like Juto and Borneo are like fun characters. And they are tournament legal, but they're not like tournament viable. And that's okay. Like that's their point as characters. They're supposed to be cutesy mascots. They're not supposed to be like, yes, I can compete in a tournament. Like you could, and it's like Dan Hibiki, right? Like Dan is like on average marginally worse than everybody else. But like that's his point. That's the point of the character.
Yeah, this is also a little silly, but because they are somewhat harder to get than other characters,
They should be strong.
if they suddenly start getting a ton of changes, we're gonna have a lot of people being like, "Oh, how do I pick up a copy of Dev Extended?" And I mean that is a legitimate concern.
Yeah.
But yes, they are kind of joke characters. They're not as underpowered as one might think.
No, they're not.
Especially after Dash changed to dodge. But yeah, they're kind of bad.
Wait, they have an RNG finisher? No, they don't. They have
Yes,
everything,
they do.
but isn't it just like you both play War, essentially?
That's basically RNG. It's the
Isn't
guess
that-
of base. I mean, it is also the like entire UA of a character in Wanderers. But hey, that's life.
I mean, it's like Seth. Like you're guessing a base. Like you think Seth's RNG? It's like no, right?
Well,
you can make
there's no
educated guesses.
Filtering, right? There's very limited filtering.
Yeah, but you can make educated guesses. It's not entirely RNG, like it's a dice roll or something. You have agency in that situation.
Yes, what Paul Johnson said is correct.
All right.
There's
that's fair. Okay.
2 more questions. Then we're done.
Go for it.
No,
How
we
do
can rapid fire through everything. Okay, but it's okay.
How do you build a successful 3-character team?
So it's mine, I guess.
Yeah.
Charles,
You are
you're
3-time world champ.
So my I would say build a team that complements each other. Basically, find a character team that can beat every character in the game. So if you know someone who's going up against someone else and you feel like, yeah, this could work out, or you feel like this is an impossible matchup, make at least one of the other characters have a decent to good matchup against those people. And if you find one character in the whole cast of, like, what is it now, 62 characters or something?
I think it's like 71.
71 characters, sure. Go nuts. You can just, if it's just one character, you have always a choice of banning that character. So, yeah, that's usually how you have to play it. Find characters that have good, decent matchups, and then ban one character because that character is like out of your comfort zone, basically.
Mm.
Yep, that's basically what it is. I mean, pick characters that you're comfortable with. Pick characters that hopefully don't all lose to one archetype. If you're Charles, you pick 3 Flight 4 higher control characters, shuffle them together, and take the 3 on top. But in general, whatever you're most comfortable with, as long as you don't just like explode against rangers or explode against stat monsters, you should be okay with whatever you feel comfortable with.
Move on so we can answer more questions.
All right. Mean question from Marco. How guilty do you feel for dropping the ball in original arc?
A little bit guilty, but not so guilty. Like, you should see Arik version 1. That's a simple like the thing about it is that there's a big difference between like I think current Arik is a bit overpowered, but like it ended up becoming like a circle bias. Like, my friends and I just ended up maining characters and having a certain playstyle that worked against Arik. Like, if you're balancing Arik and like you're like, okay, so this character's no longer OP, but the people you were playing against Arik were people like, I don't know, freaking Cadenza and Hepzibah. It's like,
or characters with lots of movement effects tend to do well against Arik.
Characters with like Demetros or something like that. Like, it's atrocious. Like sure, you might think Arik is like super, super, super broken, but like against those specific characters, he actually feels really good to play against. That's just it. Okay.
Yeah, it's also really easy to get into a situation where you play as a broken character for a long time, and then that character gets nerfed, and they're still overpowered, but they just feel way more fair than the old version.
Exactly.
And it trips people up.
Yeah, so
that happens
like,
a lot.
Version 1 Arik was dealing 15 damage guaranteed, and you couldn't do anything about it. Like that was version 1 Arik.
Yeah,
and
now it's only 7.
Now it's only 7 or 5. It depends. But yeah. Like, it's better than 15.
It's definitely a
better
balance.
than 15.
All right, let's move on. Keep going. Rapid fire.
How do you balance weird characters like Braun and however you say that?
Byron and Jenna?
Yeah.
So, weirdly enough, after a lot of discussion, the thing with Byron is that he stomps heavyweights, and against everyone else is like one of the most balanced characters in the game. So, good job on Brad and the old balance team for that. Basically, Jenna is also balanced somehow, but kind of not fun to play against. So she's been kind of an ongoing discussion. But basically, the only way to really get good balance is you playtest them a bunch, and you see where their weird system starts breaking down. So for Byron, if you have 4 anti-heavy tools and 1 anti-speedster tool, he probably has a problem against heavies. And so reducing his anti-heavy tools to, say, 2, it tends to kind of get the job done. And that's really how it is. A lot of it is just sort of seeing how certain things interact with other things, right? His reverse soak is a hilarious card. It's kind of busted.
Yeah.
But, you lose a life for every soak you have, for every soak the opponent has, ignore soak. It's kind of busted. But if he doesn't have that, plus his UA, plus on hit auto dodge, plus Deathless's damage cap, that's some combination of weakening one of those. In this case, we weakened his on hit auto dodge to a power penalty, so it doesn't work as well against heavies. Tends to sort of smooth out the rough edges while keeping a lot of his weirdness still intact.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Let's move on. Let's move on. Oh no.
Yeah. Any of the alternate costumes get balancing?
No. So in general, we're not trying to do too much balancing on the alternate game rules. I know that multiplayer is kind of insane in general, and a lot of alt costumes are a little fuzzy. I guess technically Voco alt costume got balanced because it's now primary costume.
Yeah.
But otherwise, no, not as part of this scope.
Yeah. Okay.
How would you change? How would the game change if you had 30 health?
A lot. It's basically like everyone fights Byron now. Like, you essentially have to take 3, 4, 5 extra hits, and that's a big deal in BattleCon.
Yeah.
The life total stays at 20 for most times.
Discounting, characters like Magdalena, you tend to have slower games in general, obviously, but also the game is a lot more forgiving of positioning mistakes because you have that extra life buffer. And it's just a slower game. One thing that's come up a lot in BCO especially is how long the game takes is a very significant question. Paper games can take forever, especially because people do take a while to pick their attack pairs because there's a lot of information to process. BCO tournaments going to time is really not rare. And for BattleCon tournaments, for BCO, when we implemented a timer, some people are like, oh, it's really fast. But a lot of people really like the fact that, hey, the game is now like 20-minute matches are standard. The biggest concern that I would have with something like 30 life and 20 beats is just the game taking too long. And I mean, I'm sure people have played games that are an hour and a half plus. I think my record is like a 2.5 hour long Agena versus Tannis.
Sounds wonderful.
It is what it is. That would be my biggest concern, really. Less than balance, where it would just be escalation characters needing to be tuned.
Yeah.
What are your favorite characters thematically?
Oh, this is the last question. Absolutely great.
What's that?
I think I'll start. I think my favorite theme mechanic tie-in, particularly, and one of my favorite characters is Wardlaw. I think his the whole gimmick works really well. He's just a silly character, but also it just works really well. I also like New Caitlyn a lot, and I like Burgundy a lot in terms of how their themes work, where they're sort of putting stuff on the board, trying to mess with it. Burgundy is just fun.
Yeah, sounds great. My answer to this is Wardlaw. So we're two birds of the same feather, Daniel. I love the theme of. I'm a pro wrestling fan, so I definitely have to like Wardlaw. And I've always wanted a grappler in BattleCon, and he's the only one that actually feels like a grappler, because like you can say like, oh, Kaja's a grappler and all that stuff.
Feels like a grappler to me.
I mean, yeah, but it's like, how does she pull you? Vines or something? I don't get it. Like, she's insect girl, not vine girl. Like, see, like the theme doesn't work with me. Like, so, like, I know that she mechanically feels like a grappler, but theme-wise, she doesn't feel like a grappler, is my qualm. So, Wardlaw, very good. My other favorite theme that I've always wanted to play and ended up playing but absolutely suck at is heavy mix-up characters like Glenn Hyde and Seraphina. I love the concept of like doing mix-ups and vortexes, but I'm horrible at it. Because again, I like playing characters like Riflum and Rexan and Joel, who all have these like, oh yeah, I have all the options, rather than the mix-up characters that are like, oh, I have options, but they only deal with specific things. And
just play Alexian.
No, I'm not gonna degrade. Charles?
Okay, so I'm obviously biased because I have two characters in game. I mean, one character currently in game and one in this Kickstarter. But characters that have, the obvious themes that actually, like, is consistent with what they're trying to be. So, for example, the Phoenix, Rebirth, cool. Syndra, yay, love it. And Daijin, Wishes, yeah. Cool. I also love characters like Callister. Basically, transform characters are my big, like... I love transform characters, thematically.
Even Jin is a transform character. Huh?
Sort of. Charles just wants everyone to have at least 10 cards.
Yeah.
At least 10 cards. How about you, Chris? How about you? What's like thematically, not mechanically?
I think thematically I like something that feels like really powerful. Again, going back to the genie, like I like the huge numbers. I don't care if you get these drawbacks because I get to feel cool making a huge swing. That's what I like to feel. So
sounds like
Resident Mikhail main now.
Yeah, you should just play Mikhail from BattleCon Online. Like that's literally his entire kit. Oppressively strong with drawbacks.
I was playing the guy with the sword for a while. What gives you chivalry counters?
Oh literally also that, yeah. But he's Mikhail is even more drastic Alexian. His cards are even better, but his drawbacks are even worse. So.
Yeah, but like what Marco was saying, I gotta have a theme link, and that's a big part of tabletop in general, right? I mean, you gotta believe in the fantasy. That's half the fun. So
exactly. Yeah.
Well, everyone, thank you for joining us on this stream. We'll be making an update on Monday with what's coming up the next week. We're gonna have a showcase. We're gonna have more live streams. We'll have more content for the last 2 weeks of BattleCon Unleashed. So thank you all for coming. Thank you guys for coming to the cast, and thank you for watching. All right, bye, everybody.
Bye.
Have a good one.
Have a good one. Thank you, World of Indians. Thank you and good night. I have to say it every time. I'm sorry.
Required.
It's required.
Good night,
All right.
everyone. Bye.
Happy gaming!